I don't know why it started doing that now. Okay, so welcome to Pushing Back Against Aging. My name is Mike Ventresca, and I'm one of the co-founders of Vital Choice, along with my brother. We founded Vital Choice in 1998. And if you've joined us before, thanks so much for coming back. And if this is your first time in, or you haven't been into our store before, welcome. If I just can sum up Vital Choice really quickly for you, I would say we're a community health food store. We think two major things are important. We need to have really effective natural products, but maybe even more importantly, we need to be able to discuss those products. And so information is big for us. So if you have any questions, come on in and join us. With that being said, tonight is kind of an extension of that mission to educate as well as to help people get and stay healthy. And so we're going to be looking at this webinar tonight, Pushing Back Against Aging. And it is kind of a series that we've begun with Nicole. And this topic that we're doing a deep dive on tonight is inflammation. And that really is kind of the root of our series. And this is our second episode. But this really probably should have been our first, because inflammation kind of underlies all of these different deep dives we're going to do as we go through this. So with that being said, let's get into it. Tonight's presenter is Nicole Gould. Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
And Nicole is a registered dietitian as well as a functional nutritionist. She has been involved in some way or another with Vital Choice, I think since 2005. So we've been with Nicole for some time. She's a great presenter and she's super knowledgeable. So with that being said, just a couple more housekeeping points and then we'll get started. We have a Q&A box somewhere on your screen. You should see Q&A. If you have any questions, please at any time go ahead and submit the questions. We'll probably take those at the end. Nicole will just kind of fly through them and answer them at the end. But please don't wait until the end to submit those questions. If something pops in your mind at any time, go ahead and submit it. And then also, as I mentioned right when we got started here, I am recording this and we will post it on our website. And there'll be more information at the end of the presentation. But don't worry, if you do need to step away or you lose your internet connection or something, no worries. It will be on the website, should be on there tomorrow. And so you could go back and review it. I will also put a PDF of the slides up on our site as well. So you'll have that benefit as well. So with that being said, I'm going to step away, mute my mic, and turn it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to talk to you about a topic that, as Mike mentioned, is really something that affects all of us. And if you didn't know it already, you certainly will by the end of this presentation, because it is something involved in so many different things in the body. But keeping with this theme of pushing back against aging, I just wanted to start again with reviewing, if you were at the first seminar in this series, this may be some repeat info, but I think it's worth revisiting because when we think about aging, I think immediately we focus on like wrinkles and skin and like physically what happens, but there's also a significant decrease in physical and mental capacity. And with that comes a growing risk of disease. And certainly inflammation can really increase that risk as well. There are many things that accelerate aging, and that's why we decided to make this a series. So we talked about blood sugar and obesity at the first talk. Today, I want to talk about inflammation. We're really going to focus in on inflammation. Future seminars, we're going to talk about sleep and stress and some other things as well. So we'll hit all of those topics. But let's start by talking about inflammation in why we have inflammation to begin with. It's a good thing in moderation. So there's acute inflammation. If you get hurt, if you're injured, you sprain an ankle, something like that, this is a response from the immune system to heal. It really causes pain and redness and swelling, and that comes on very rapidly. So this is something that is short-term, comes on rapidly, and is designed to heal. It's designed to initiate this cascade of different cytokines and other mediators that are really helping to get rid of the damaged tissue, get rid of the debris, and help to stimulate and support the generation of new tissue and heal that injury. So in a sense, inflammation, it's not all bad. It's definitely there for a reason. I like to think of acute inflammation like a campfire. You build it on purpose. It's there for a reason. It's short term. When you're done with it, you put it out and you move on. And that's kind of acute inflammation. But what happens if that inflammation is being triggered unnecessarily or not in the correct way? What if there's inflammation that's happening in places it's not supposed to be there? And I think of that like a forest fire. Think of how destructive, think of how damaging that is versus a nice warm little campfire. And that's, you know, at least in my brain, it helps me make sense of the difference between the good, that acute healing inflammation versus this chronic systemic inflammation. So chronic inflammation, this is big, is often silent. You do not have to have pain to have chronic inflammation. And that's something I hear a lot of people say is, oh, I don't, you know, I'm fine. I don't ache anywhere. I don't really have back problems yet or any issues like that. Chronic inflammation is often silent. So you have no idea really if it's there. And it happens where there's just like these constant triggers. You're getting exposed to some sort of irritant or something that is triggering an inflammatory reaction chronically all the time, little bits or sometimes significant amounts that happen regularly. This is very common in someone with an autoimmune disorder, but it is something, and I'm going to talk about, it affects every part of us. If we don't eliminate these triggers and if we don't help to modulate and reduce that inflammation, it will absolutely accelerate aging and increase your risk for disease. It's no secret though. I mean, I know Time Magazine had The Secret Killer. This was years ago. I don't remember. I should have paid attention to what year, but I think it's significant whenever you have something like this on the cover of a magazine talking about how chronic inflammation may be one of the drivers for old age. There's a lot of experts, a lot of names on here you may know. Dr. Mark Hyman, almost every modern disease is caused by or affected by hidden inflammation. Dr. Weil, he started the Center for Integrative Medicine in Arizona. It's becoming increasingly clear that chronic inflammation is the root cause of many serious illnesses. So you can see Dr. Sinatra, Dr. Amy Myers, like all of these pretty high up and well-known practitioners that pay attention to functional medicine in a sense that they're looking at the body as a whole versus just one piece, seem to really focus in on inflammation and how that is a major problem for Americans. Why is it such a problem? Okay, so what's the big deal? We have chronic inflammation. Well, I talked about how damaging it can be, but just what does it damage? Every part of us in some way or another, certainly increasing risk for neurological disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and dementia. And that is something that I feel like many of us feel like as we age, we're going to have some sort of memory loss. Inflammation is a huge driver of that. So is blood sugar, which we talked about at the first seminar, but inflammation is as well. Certain cardiovascular issues, atherosclerosis, heart failure, heart disease, stroke, those are all inflammatory conditions. Diabetes is an inflammatory issue. And along with it, all those complications that come with diabetes are inflammatory as well. And that's because high blood sugar can cause inflammation. There's certain inflammatory conditions like inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, pancreatitis, anything that ends in itis is an inflammatory condition. Cancer, there's a lot of research looking at inflammatory cells like COX-2 and things that are surrounding these tumors, essentially like fueling them. And if we can eliminate and help to modulate that, would that help reduce our cancer risk? So I think that's really interesting. There's liver inflammation, inflammatory liver issues, kidney disease, sleep apnea, heart disease, as I mentioned before. And then some conditions that many find surprising. So osteoporosis is one that I know people don't necessarily think of as an inflammatory condition, but We're constantly building and breaking down bone. The bone is tissue, you know, it's cells that are rebuilding all the time. I think they say every 7 years we build like a new skeleton. But what happens if our bone breaks down faster than it can rebuild? We have bone loss. Inflammation does just that. It actually speeds up these osteoclasts, these cells that break down our bone. So when that gets sped up, we can't keep up with building it. And that's not something that just taking calcium is going to fix. So there's really a lot more to all of these diseases on here. And I don't know about you at home, but I know someone with all of these things. You know, we all know someone that has a dementia issue, or that has a liver issue, or that has osteoporosis, or that has cancer. These are conditions that we tend to accept. These are some of the top 6 killers in the United States are on this list. And if we could reduce that inflammation, could we also reduce these diseases, the prevalence of these diseases in the United States? I believe we can. We just have to work at it. So let's talk a little bit about inflammation and aging. I love this. I didn't even know this term existed until a few weeks ago, inflammaging. That is because inflammation has pretty much been proven to accelerate aging. So it's damaging our DNA, so damaging at a cellular level our tissues and organs. It causes collagen breakdown, and then it certainly causes more risk for age-related diseases. I was reading some studies, and there's a quote at the bottom here that talks about aged individuals, so those that are aging, have constantly elevated levels of inflammatory cytokines, and that can cause muscle atrophy and cancer because it's damaging the DNA. So, wow. I mean, what a destructive thing that inflammation is. I know even with heart disease, it's something that it's like, oh, lower your cholesterol, lower your blood sugar or your blood pressure. But it's very common for people that have heart disease and heart attacks and stroke to have normal cholesterol levels. But most all of them have high levels of inflammatory markers. I did not make a slide, and I'm just thinking about it now. I should have. There are some labs and things that you can ask your doctor for so that you can see where your inflammation is at. One of them is homocysteine. One of them is highly sensitive C-reactive protein, or HSCRP. So those are 2 tests, homocysteine, HSCRP, that can help to give you an idea of where your inflammatory levels are. There are other things too, and I always suggest getting like deep level blood sugar and things like that. But that can at least give you an idea of where you're at, where your inflammation status is. It's important to get those tests regularly. So when you get cholesterol tested every 6 months or whatever it is, ask them to throw on some HSCRP. It should be covered by insurance. You can double check your specific plan, but I think that's important because we see it so much with anyone who has heart disease or dementia or some of those other diabetes, some of those other diseases as well. So why do we have so much inflammation? Inflammation is linked to about 80% of diseases, and it's involved in some of the top killers of Americans. And why is it? Well, poor diet. You knew, if you didn't know I was going to talk about diet, you're in the wrong place, because we're going to get deep into diet for inflammation. Stress, cortisol levels, that stress hormone drives up inflammation. It's like a panic button. Like when you're stressed internally, even if you feel like you're handling it well, internally, it's like a panic button, fire alarm is going off, and it like fuels all of these hormones, and that can stimulate inflammation. It drives up blood sugar as well. So stress is something that we really have to get a good grip on. I'm going to get deeper into stress at a future seminar in this series. But I wanted to just mention it now because it's something we should all be aware of. Toxins, we're going to talk about where are we exposed to toxins, and it's probably more places than you think. And then high blood sugar, as I addressed at the first seminar, but that's something that we have to kind of maintain those levels so they're not driving up more inflammation. let's get into toxins a little bit. So I know like the weather is warming up, and my dad's kind of crazy. He grills all year. Like in a snowstorm, he'll be out there grilling. And I always like to remind him that those char grill marks, those nice little char grill marks that we see on a steak are, I've heard, equivalent to like smoking 20 packs of cigarettes as far as the inflammation and kind of carcinogenic ability that they have. So when you're thinking about it, like, yeah, you're cooking on gas or you're cooking on charcoal that's probably been treated with lighter fluid or who knows, you know, some sort of flammable poison, basically. And then we're cooking on that. Same thing if we smoke a food, we're literally putting smoke toxins into our food. And it's not to say that you can't grill. It's not to say that you can't do that. It's just we need to be aware of just how inflammatory that is. So then we can, on the side, have some anti-inflammatory foods to go with it that we can kind of then balance it out. Inflammation is not like one constant thing. It is always fluctuating. So the more you do to push back against it, the better you're going to be. It's a constant kind of thing that you're going to have to go back and forth. So one bad meal isn't going to make or break your chronic inflammation levels. It's the lifetime. What have you been doing for months and months and months? And that's what's going to count. Non-stick cookware, you just have to be careful that you are replacing it more often than we probably are. I mean, I know I've had cookware that I've kept. I try not to get non-stick. I try to get stainless steel. But I have friends that they pull out this nonstick pan and it's got all these scratch marks on it. And I'm like, how long? You've had that for 5-10 years? That is not what nonstick cookware is meant for. It is meant to be replaced every few years, especially if you use it a lot. So just be aware, because we don't want those toxins to then get in your body and stimulate a inflammatory reaction. Plastics, cooking in plastics. If you do a lot of frozen meals, or if you're someone that has those plastic containers that you just like to reuse, you've got to be really careful with those as well, because plastic can leach in compounds that can interfere with hormone response and can drive up inflammation as well. And I've read some things about causing cancer and having a higher risk for that. So not just about, which we're going to talk about what to eat, it's also about how do you prepare it and how do you cook it. So you just have to be careful. If you marinate meat, it's better. It's not going to develop those same inflammatory compounds. So marinate for at least 30 minutes to an hour in some sort of like oil and vinegar or something like that, lemon juice, whatever. That helps to kind of prevent more toxins from coming in. The less you grill something, the less toxins will build up. So something like seafood would be safer than like the giant steak that you're seeing on your screen there. And vegetables, when vegetables are grilled, they tend not to build up the same inflammatory compounds as meat. Meat, really, when you cook it, it produces some real volatile compounds. So you just have to be careful about that. Sometimes people pre-cook stuff and then just put it on the grill to get that final sear. But those are just some ways that you can help decrease. If you like something more rare, that'll have less toxins that are inflammatory versus something burnt type of food. What about in skincare and household supplies? It just, when I think about it, especially as a woman, like how many products I just see all over. And I think about like in the day, it's like we wake up, take a shower, and you're using soap that probably has some sort of fragrance or perfume in it, and who knows what other chemicals. Then you're putting on shampoo and conditioner, same thing. Then you're putting on lotion. Then we're doing hair products, which are mostly straight chemicals that are causing inflammation issues. Then we spray perfume, and where do we spray it? Right on our thyroid, causing some inflammatory that gets sucked right in. Then the room has to smell good. So we pull out our, Bath and Body Works candles or our room spray, and you see all these things. Then it's time to do the laundry. And what do we do our laundry in? Tons of fragrance and tons of chemical products. And you put a dryer sheet in, and it's just like, Then you have makeup. It's like in the course of a day, there is so much exposure to these potentially toxic ingredients, parabens, phthalates, triclosan, which is in a lot of the antibacterial sanitizers, which is very problematic. Petroleum, ammonia, chlorine, acetone, benzene. I mean, the list really, I could have filled up 3 slides with the lists of some of the chemicals that are in household products. And I didn't even touch cleaning products yet. So you just have to be, again, really aware. How am I balancing this? Can I use vinegar? Vinegar is my favorite thing to clean with. Love it. I use white, it's cheap. It doesn't have fragrance in it. It doesn't have toxins in it. And you can mix some with baking soda. It's really good on like in the sink to kind of clear out all the grease. You could use it really anywhere. On windows and stuff, I find it's a little streaky. So I'll do like the Ecos or 7th generation, some sort of like natural based window or mirror cleaner. Laundry, fragrance free, get rid of the fragrance and don't worry about trying to mask and make everything smell like a, flower or a meadow. Like it doesn't have to, we don't have to have like pumpkin spice in the summer or in the fall and like all these crazy scents constantly filling our homes. So just be aware, you got those plugins. Are you using air freshener? Are you doing candles all the time? There are natural versions of all of those things I just mentioned. You can use essential oils to make your house more fragrant. You can add those to your laundry detergent too, if you get a fragrance free, but you still want to make it smell nice. It's just an important thing to think about in your life. Okay, how many things am I using that have some of these chemicals in it? And hopefully you can decrease that, because every time you're exposed to these, inflammation. Okay, I see a question come in, and I think it's related to what I'm just talking about. If we grill on cast iron pans or Yoshi mats, does that minimize the problems with grilling since the food is not directly in the flames? Yes, especially like, I'm not as familiar with a Yoshi mat, but a cast iron pan, if something is a barrier in between where the charcoal, where the gas would be, and that would be okay, because essentially you're just heating that pan. So, I mean, to me, that would be another way to kind of reduce the toxin exposures. When you do that, if there's something in between, you'll notice you don't build up, you're not going to build those like burn, scorch, char grill marks, because it's not directly on that super high heat. So yeah, that's a great question. And I think that would be something that would potentially be helpful. And I'm going to look up the Yoshi mats that you mentioned and see. Okay, what else? Oh dear, it's that time of year right now where everyone's in their gardens and everyone's got their weed killer out, and I see the trucks in my neighborhood of some people that have their lawns done, and I'm just like, oh no, here we go. We gotta just, again, if you're not familiar with the stories around Roundup, get familiar with them. People are literally getting terrible, terminal illnesses from chemical exposure to lawn chemicals. And it's the stuff that's allowed is crazy to me, and we just have to be more aware of it. And to me, it's like, okay, it's a dandelion. I'll take that over having a disease. Like in my head, that's what I think about all the time. I'm like, it's a dandelion. We used to eat those. That used to be a sustainable way to help your liver and eat the greens and helps to detox you. And now we're just spraying those things to death. So don't worry about the weeds so much. It's okay. Someone's asking, are air fryers okay? They also have a nonstick coating. Yeah, it just really depends with the air fryer. I don't have one yet, but my friends keep telling me to get one. I've never used one, but I like the idea, and correct me if I'm wrong. There's a metal thing in the middle, like a stainless steel or something in the middle where you put the food. So it's not actually coming into contact with some of the other parts, at least the one that I've seen doesn't. So it's not actually touching the nonstick coating, but does that mean the nonstick coating isn't cooking in? If it's scratched, if it's old, there's a potential for it to be toxic. They're getting better. There's more like green pans and things coming out that are developing these nonstick coatings that aren't as toxic as what used to be, you know, in the 80s and 90s, and maybe we even still have some of those pans. So yeah, so getting back to the lawn stuff, just be careful. Again, it's killing something. It's the same thing for like insect repellent and things like that. If you are killing one species, even if it's a plant species, it probably is doing something at a cellular level to us as well, because all living things, in a sense, will have some sort of reaction to those things. Same thing with a lot of our foods that are putting in preservatives and artificial food dyes. I get so angry about food coloring. I just don't understand. Why does everything have to be like fluorescent orange and blue? Like, I feel like we drink juice and we drink like sports drinks and all those things just the same. We'd eat popsicles if they didn't have like this crazy amount of food coloring. It's just not necessary. It's in our medications. It's in, you know, anything, toothpaste. Why do we need everything to be crazy colored? And what is that doing to our health? And what is that doing to inflammation and to our brains? So that's something that I just wish didn't exist. And then of course, pesticides and herbicides. If you aren't familiar with it, the Environmental Working Group puts out a list every year, and they just published a couple weeks ago the 2021 version, and it did change a little bit. Potatoes came off of it, and I forgot what came on it, but it's the 12, it's called the Dirty Dozen. So if you go to ewg.org, Dirty Dozen list, or just Google Dirty Dozen, it will give you the 12 highest pesticide, herbicide containing produce. So strawberries and spinach are always on there. They're always at the top of the list. Grapes are almost always on there. Nectarines, a lot of things that have not a thick skin. They also have a clean 15 list, which is a list of the 15 lowest pesticide containing fruits and vegetables. So like avocados are on that, and broccoli are on that. So you don't have to worry as much about maybe going organic with those types of foods. But for me, berries and like any of my greens, kale, spinach, lettuce, I really try to make sure that those are organic. And there are so many companies like Buckeye, is an Ohio farm that does an herbicide, pesticide-free green. You can find it at every grocery store. It's already washed. Like, they're making it easier than ever with a lot of I've seen organic foods at Walmart. You know, when that happens, it's getting easier to buy them. Are they more expensive? Yes, but not that much more. And to me, that's worth it. That's one of those places where it's like, I'll spend a little extra just to know, and then I'll save on the clean 15 stuff. I don't worry as much if it's not organic. And that's how you can kind of balance and eat organic, reduce your pesticide and herbicide exposures. These people are like full hazmat suits when they're spraying these crops. And it's just crazy to me that then it's like okay to eat, and we don't expect it to, in a lifetime of eating these foods, have any repercussions. No, it's inflammation that is really triggering inflammation and damage in our bodies. What else? Well, there's foods themselves that really trigger inflammation. And to me, it's great to be aware of these things and just to know, again, so we can balance it out. But these are really foods that will come up no matter what talk I'm doing. If I'm talking about brain health, if I'm talking about heart health, if I'm talking about blood sugar, aging, it's pretty much the same culprits. So I hope it doesn't bore you that I'm talking about kind of the same foods, but just kind of, we gotta get better at reducing a lot of these foods, because these are big problems. Sugar and processed foods, you know, sugar stimulates blood sugar, and it is in everything. It's in our spaghetti sauce, it's in our bread. Like, it's not, we're not just talking about cookies and candies and pastries and stuff, but it's, you know, graham crackers and, you know, like the little snack foods and pretzels and like all these things that are just empty calorie, refined carb, you know, added sugar type products. And many of us are just living off of those, thinking like we just open a box. And cereals are one of like how that got marketed as a healthy breakfast, especially some of these children's cereals, I will never understand. It's like sugar and food coloring, and it's just driving inflammation through the roof. So those are foods. These are foods you want to pay special attention to. Dairy, I always get a lot of questions about because, oh, dairy's good. How am I going to get my calcium? Again, to me, like we've got bigger places we should be looking for bone health, not getting more calcium necessarily. But dairy's got some, like the dairy industry has some really good marketing and funding and things like that. So it really isn't a necessary food. But do I love cheese? Absolutely. You know, that's something that I feel like, oh, I hate that I don't get to eat it as much as I want. But you know, that's kind of I find other things that now I find I'm gravitating to. Right now I'm on a macadamia nut kick and olive kick. So, you know, it's not exactly the same, but for me, it fills that void. It fills some of that habit. And to know I'm doing something that's better for me and fighting against inflammation, among other things, I really think is worth it then. Saturated fats. So these are your animal fats pretty much, with the exception of like a coconut oil or something like that. Pretty much animal fats are not that coconut oil is an animal fat, but it's more of a saturated fat. But animal type fats that are giving saturated fats, like all of the things you see on the screen, these processed meats and lunch meats and hot dogs and a lot of those ham and things like that, those are really super inflammatory foods that we want to avoid as much as possible. And then high omega-6 foods. We're going to talk about essential fatty acids a little deeper, omega-3 rich foods in a minute, but I just want to touch on foods like corn, wheat, eggs, dairy, peanuts, vegetable oils, and red meat. Like whenever I say that list, I always think like, oh, it's the American diet. Like if I told you you could never eat any of those foods again, it would be like sheer panic in the world, because that's kind of what our diet is built around. And those are all very high omega-6 foods. Omega-6 is an essential fatty acid, meaning our bodies need omega-6. It's important. However, there are certain types of omega-6, arachidonic acid being one, that is, it skips all of the good stuff and it kind of just drives inflammation. We also eat way more omega-6 than we do omega-3, which I'll talk about next. And so omega-3 fights against inflammation. Omega-6 at a significant level will fuel it. So we want to make sure that we're eating more plant-based omega-6 type foods versus a diet high in dairy and meats and things like that are more of the bad kind of omega-6. And then just watch the amounts of the other stuff. Corn is in everything, dairy is in pretty much everything. And unless you're trying to like really watch wheat, that's something that you'll see in a lot of places as well. So you just want to watch that and try to, again, balance it out with some of the good foods that I'm going to talk about next. I see we have a question. If milk or dairy comes from grass-fed, pasture-raised cows and is non-pasteurized, does it cause inflammation? That's an awesome question. And you are kind of on to something that whenever an animal is able to eat what kind of like nature intended, so instead of being fed corn and wheat and soy and other things, which is what most cattle are eating, they're allowed to pasture feed. And that allows them to make some good omegas that allow them to be less inflammatory. And so when you see like an organic grass-fed milk, you'll usually see something on the label talking about omega-3, because that is passed down into the milk, then those fatty acids that decrease inflammation. So I still wouldn't overdo dairy. It's still a food that don't really need, but if you like it, then yes, doing a grass-fed pasture-raised version of it is definitely going to be less inflammatory. In fact, may have some anti-inflammatory benefits that kind of counteract some of the other stuff in it. So that's a really good question. Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to address that, so that was good. All right, I gave you all the bad. Let's talk about some of the good stuff. It's always easier to focus on what you should be eating and what you can eat versus some of those like eliminate this and get rid of this. Start by just focusing on how can I add more anti-inflammatory foods into my diet. And one of the best ways is to eat more foods that have omega-3s in them. Omega-3 fatty acid is really high in wild fish, certain wild fish like wild salmon, wild sardines, mackerel, herring. Those are some of the best fish that we could be eating. So I have a lot of people that say, oh, I eat fish, and I'll ask them more about it, and they'll tell me they're eating tilapia or orange roughy or tuna. And those aren't the fish. First of all, those fish have some higher levels of heavy metals in them, but also those fish don't have omega-3s in significant amounts. So we want to kind of weigh that balance of not having a lot of contaminants and heavy metals, but also having high levels of omega-3. And wild salmon and wild sardines, in my opinion, are the two best that you should be eating. And when I say should be eating, I'm talking about 2 to 3 times a week at least. And if that can't happen for you, if you don't like fish, if you're sitting there like giving me that face that I love to see people in person, because as soon as I say the word fish, I get like a very big reaction from people. And I know right away, like who's eating it and who's not, because the people that are like sitting up real proud. They're like, I eat that 3 times a week. I love salmon. I order it at restaurants, all of that stuff. We just have to eat more. It's not something that we eat enough of. And when we do eat fish, it's like deep fried, fish fry, filet of fish type situations. And that's not giving you your omega-3s. So we want to decrease inflammation. Omega-3s are some of the best things to do that because they have their own anti-inflammatory effects, and then they're reducing the inflammatory effect of omega-6s, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like a double whammy. So olive oil, walnuts, almonds, chia, flax are great, but any plant-based source will not be as powerful as wild fish would. With the exception of like if you do a supplement of like an algae-based oil, that's right up there as well. But if you're eating it, if you're trying to like just use flax seeds instead of eating fish, they're not the same because flax has to convert into something before it converts into the EPA and DHA and DPA. Those are like the big parts of omega-3 that are so beneficial. And it's just not, our bodies aren't that great at converting plant-based omegas into that. That being said, those are still really good foods to incorporate. Those are foods that I try to incorporate almost every single day. And no, I do incorporate those. I'm just looking at that list. I'm like, I eat all those things all the time. Olive oil, cook more with it, drizzle it on your salads. Try not to deep fry in it. You could use avocado oil at a higher heat, but olive oil I like to keep on lower heat or as like a finish. Roast some vegetables and then drizzle some olive oil or like a nice dressing or something with olive oil in it over it. So get your fats, but get the right kinds of fats. Get rid of some of the saturated animal type fats, the deep fried stuff, and vegetable oils and all of those that are fueling inflammation. And let's add more of these good fats in. And that's a great, great way to reduce inflammation with food. Another powerhouse way that's probably right in your cabinet or your fridge is using herbs and spices. And I don't think herbs and spices in a like cooking sense get enough attention for how therapeutic they can be. They contain tons of antioxidants, anti-inflammatory compounds, minerals, and vitamins. So they're not just about flavoring, they're actually making your meal more nutrient dense and more anti-inflammatory. Turmeric, ginger, rosemary, oregano, cloves, cinnamon, garlic, like all of those things are wonderful. I would just encourage you to, again, if you have, I know for me, like you know, you have like a wedding shower and you get a spice rack, and then you have it for like 15 years with the same spice jars, right? Like you don't necessarily think about replacing those. And Q Vital Choice coming along and having a bulk section with herbs and spices, I emptied out all of my jars the one day, cleaned them all out, let them dry, and refilled them. I think I filled up 25 jars, and it was like $20, you know, and now I have all these organic, really potent. You could smell how much more potent. You could see the color is more rich. We have like a smoked paprika and some other like really just yummy herbs here. So I encourage you to find good quality. And if you can't get in here, you can go to another like more health food store. Even a regular grocery store probably has some organic herbs and spices. Use them. You could add turmeric in with your rice, or if you're making a stew, or if you're doing like a chili. Rosemary is amazing on potatoes or chicken. Ginger is one of my favorites. I just add some ginger with hot water and lemon and make like a little ginger tea out of it. But you could certainly use it in any sort of like stir fry. It's really yummy. Ginger can be a little spicy. So if you don't like spice, you might want to use something more like thyme or rosemary, which are great. Garlic. So yummy. Cinnamon, I tried, like if someone does oatmeal, I have them add cinnamon to it, or a sweet potato. It's really good to have just some cinnamon on there. And there you go. You know, you're just finding these moments of how do I make this more anti-inflammatory, and herbs and spices are just an awesome, awesome way to do it. Okay. So what does it look like? Oh my gosh, how beautiful is this? Sometimes I put the American diet up, which is just all like beige foods that don't have a lot of color and are high in omega-6 fatty acids and cause a lot of inflammation, versus this. This is more like this is Mediterranean diet, if you will, is more of an anti-inflammatory type diet. Something that's more like paleo is another thing, a Whole30 type of diet. I like some of these more, you know, they might seem like more fad diets, but they do focus a lot on real foods. And that's what it's about. Most of the foods you're seeing on here are one ingredient or based on ingredients put together that are all clean, healthy stuff that you buy, you know, in the perimeter of the grocery store. Eggs and avocados, oatmeal with wild blueberries. You can get those Wyman's wild blueberries and then add some cinnamon. And now you've just made your oatmeal anti-inflammatory. You have some green tea instead of your coffee. Green tea is super anti-inflammatory. And if you want it even to pack a bigger punch, you can get a type of green tea that's a powder called Matcha. We have that here in the store too. That is really great because it's powder, so you're ingesting the leaves, and it's much higher in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory capability. So that's a wonderful thing that you can do. Berries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, the deep colored berries really help to fight against inflammation. So I try to make berries and like some almonds or pecans a snack. You know, you don't have to do anything. You're just grabbing it still. So instead of reaching into that box of whatever crackers or something, you could have some nuts and seeds out and grab some berries. You can do some rainbow carrots. There's curry dishes. It's just like paying attention to color and paying attention to real ingredients. That's really the key. I have chocolate on here. If you didn't notice in the bottom right corner, that's a very important thing for me. And believe it or not, a good organic, like a dark chocolate, helps to fight against inflammation. So that's just one of those win-win situations where I pretend like I'm eating it because I'm healthy, but really I'm eating it because I love chocolate. And I just make sure I try to do like a good, really good, like Green and Blacks is one of my favorites. They make us, I think it's a 70 or 85% dark chocolate, and it doesn't have dairy added. So I like those kinds of brands. Endangered Species is another one that makes some good dark chocolate. So those are just some things you can look for and still have a treat while you're eating anti-inflammatory. If we can't eat it, that's where we supplement, right? So if you were someone that isn't that into fish, or to be quite honest, there are very few clients. I do blood testing to look at omega levels for a lot of my clients. And I don't know, I'm just trying to think. I think I've had one in the last 6-7 months that had good levels. And this was a person that grew up in Hawaii and eats a ton of seafood that has a lot of omegas. So for the rest of us, even as much as I try to get, just don't come up unless I add in another supplement. So these are two of my favorites. Omega-3s are not a place where you want to just order on Amazon or get just any old brand. They are not all created equal. This is true of most supplements, but especially when we're talking about fish oil. I've seen some dangerous things people have brought in that are just not healthy. So we want the type of fish to be known. When you're buying a fish oil, you should know right away what fish. Omega uses wild Alaskan salmon. Nordic Naturals uses sardines and anchovies, all sustainably caught. And I just love these two brands. Omega is like the closest to eating it. So I've seen great things in people's cholesterol numbers and triglycerides and inflammatory levels by using Omega. And Nordic Naturals, I have their Ultimate Omega 2X on here because it's a super high potency. It's 2150 milligrams of omega-3 in two soft gels. And that is one that I love if I've really got to get someone's inflammatory levels down and their omegas up. I will use that as well. So those are two wonderful brands. And if you are not eating fish, you are probably deficient in omega-3. So that becomes like a priority supplement, as long as you're not on blood thinners, and certainly check with your doctor before you start any new supplements. But I would think about making that a high priority. Will you take it and notice? Like, you're not going to wake up and be like, yes, I took my omegas today, but you may notice that some of your labs improve or some of your aches and pains go away. It's because we're talking about inflammation that is related to a lot of issues of arthritis and pain. And just by correcting your omega-3s for many people, that helps their pain levels. So it can also help with brain issues, memory issues, focus and concentration, mood. Very often those with depression have very low levels of omega-3s, specifically EPA. You want to get those up, and these are two great products that can help you do it. What about some herbals? So I talked about using spices and herbs in your spice cabinet. That's great for someone that is just wanting to add in, make their meals more anti-inflammatory. But if you already have an inflammatory issue, you can't eat enough of the powdered stuff to equal something that's going to really help be a therapeutic anti-inflammatory type product. So then we try to go for supplements. There's a lot of turmeric products out there, or curcumin products. We have, I don't even know how many in the store, like 20 to 30 different brands, I would guess. So I love Gaia. Gaia is a great company that pays attention to where they're sourcing their herbs from. And they also do something called supercritical extraction. So it's like taking pounds of the herbs, and just by using CO2, just by using some air, basically, or some gas, I guess, but gas sounds like a chemical. So they're using it without any chemicals and concentrating it, and they're not disrupting the natural constituent, like the natural profile of an herb. And that's one of the things when you hear like supplements aren't as good as eating it, a lot of that is because the supplement companies are changing it from what nature intended, and it doesn't have all of the benefits. If you just take a single piece of a vitamin, if you just take ascorbic acid, or if you eat an orange or take a supplement that has all of these other constituents in vitamin C, usually you get more out of that. Your body knows what to do with it. It's more potent. And that's what these companies like Gaia and New Chapter do. They keep all of the active constituents in an herb and just concentrate it so it's a lot more potent. So if you have an inflammatory issue, you may not be able to do that with diet alone, but you can add in a supplement like this that can kind of move the needle. The other New Chapter product, the New Chapter product I have on here is called Metabolic Health. It used to be called Golden Black Seed, which to me is a much better name. I don't think Metabolic Health jumps out, at least for me. I'm not like, oh yes, that's going to be the product I want. But it is a combination of turmeric and another really anti-inflammatory type herb, or type spice called black cumin seed. or black seed is another name for it. And that is a product that I think is just amazing. There's a lot of other immune benefits with black seed, and I lean more towards that product if I have someone with a lot of autoimmune issues or someone that just doesn't want just turmeric on its own. There are studies on some of the constituents in black seed that have shown to support skin and cell health, our brain, kidney, liver, inflammation modulation, also effective against yeast and fungus and mold and candida. So there's some really cool constituents in that black seed that do a lot more than just fight inflammation. So those are two great products. If you're just kind of starting out, these two here are combination formulas. So they have multiple ingredients in them, and Zyflamend is the one on the left by New Chapter, and that has just always been, I think if you say inflammation to anyone in the store, that's probably a product that immediately comes to mind because it is designed for that. That is why it is created. It was designed to lower, I talked about the COX-2 enzymes surrounding certain tumors, and Zyflamend is shown to actually reduce those and help to modulate inflammation, decrease highly sensitive CRP, which is one of those lab tests I said you can go get. It's a combination of ginger, turmeric, rosemary, oregano, all of those things that I mentioned earlier. And there's some pretty cool research behind Zyflamend. So it's one of those products that if you were to take rosemary by itself or take turmeric by itself, they're not as powerful as when they're put together. So we really, it's just a much more powerful product. It's a great product. And it really helps to modulate that pro-inflammatory enzyme, that COX-2. Vital Choice's Inflamove is another kind of, I don't want to call it an up-and-comer because we've had it for a while, but it seems to be getting more response from our customers. And the nice thing is we could see, people tell us, they share their stories, they can return a product. So we know what's working and what's not working for people. And this product is another combination formula. So it has turmeric, has another herb called boswellia that I didn't mention earlier, but that, because it's not really something you'd cook with, that's another really great inflammation modulating herb. And then it has some enzymes in it that help to kind of like bromelain, and it has some other enzymes in it that really help to kind of eat away at the debris and reduce inflammation in a different way that an herbal can. If you're someone that gets a lot of issues, maybe with like acid reflux, or you're just nervous about doing a really high power like turmeric, the Inflamove might be a better place to start because it's a little bit less of the spices and more of some of the other things like the boswellia and bromelain and some enzymes that shouldn't upset your stomach and shouldn't cause any problems if you're someone that's more sensitive to. You know, most people tolerate those other ones just fine, but you never know. So that's another product that can really help support your inflammatory levels as well as joints and other things. And then last but not least, CBD. So CBD is a constituent in the hemp plant. And these products here are tested and have, you know, if you're nervous about this being related to marijuana, it is different, it is controlled, it is legal. Like it is something that they have to specifically test and make sure there are less than 0.3% of THC, which is the component that makes people feel high and kind of more like psychoactive component. CBD does not do that. You cannot get high. Some people are disappointed by that, but you cannot off of a CBD product. But what it does do, we have all these receptors. We have this whole endocannabinoid system with all these receptors. We naturally produce endocannabinoids, but our lives kind of blunt some of that response. And so by adding in a CBD oil, you can activate those receptors and decrease inflammation. It's one of the best things about CBD that it can do. So it helps pain. It helps people like get off of major pain medications because it also has a pain modulating effect as well as an anti-inflammatory effect. So wonderfully therapeutic, also helps stress. can help people sleep. If you take like more at once, that's good for sleep. And then you can take a little bit during the day for anxiousness or for pain or for other things. So I didn't want to leave out CBD when talking about inflammation, because it truly is a great product that has helped so many people. I like Charlotte's Web. Hemp Fusion is another company that we carry. I love both of those. You want to pay attention and make sure you know the sourcing and the processing and all of that stuff when it comes to a CBD product, especially. So those are companies that I'm very comfortable with and have used types of products. So, so you can decrease inflammation, but it's up to you. It does take work. Eating more fruits and vegetables, increasing those omega-3 fatty acids by upping your good fats, avocados and wild fish, and adding in more spices. Maybe that's just something you may not think about, but adding those in, choosing grass-fed, wild, organic over like an organic free-range egg versus a regular conventional egg, more inflammatory for the conventional egg, and it's bleached to boot, you know? So you want to try to get more of an organic free range for those products. Reduce your processed foods and sugars. Get moving, of course. I didn't talk a lot about that, but we're too sedentary. That's something that definitely stimulates inflammation. And then think about supplements to fill in those gaps. And that's a way that you could really fight against this contributor to 80% of the chronic diseases and some of the top killers in the United States. So I have our store info up here, our website, vchoice.com. You can shop supplements there, have them delivered, or feel free to just call us and stop in. I'm happy to take some questions. I do see some popping up. Someone's asking, can you take too much fish oil or combinations of these products? I think you can take too much of anything. However, when it's a product that's very close to being a food, it's harder to have some sort of negative reaction. I would think if you're taking too much fish oil, your stomach might be upset, or you might have looser stools or something, versus like a toxic effect. The companies that I'm comfortable with, I wouldn't think there would be any sort of issue with a fish oil causing more harm than good. But if you're on blood thinners, there are certain people that don't tolerate fats as well. So those situations always come up that are few and far between, but you want to pay attention to them. But yeah, there's probably like, I know if someone has high triglycerides, the gold standard is 3,000 milligrams of fish oil. To me, it's more about the form that the fish oil is versus worrying about the milligrams. So I like to focus on products that are like a fish oil that's in what's called a triglyceride form. And that to me says it's in a closer form to food. So I like those products. Nordic Naturals and Whole-Mega are both triglyceride forms. So that's another reason I put those on. They tend to cause less upset if someone's sensitive to a fish oil. You don't get that repeat as much, especially with the Nordic one. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question. What milligram is a good amount to take for stress? I'm assuming you're talking about the CBD. And regardless of if you said for stress or for sleep or for pain, it's really more about the individual. CBD is one really tough category of supplements that is tough to have just like one go-to product. Like fish oil, everyone could probably benefit from taking around 2,000 milligrams. CBD, it's different. Like I go to sleep with like 1 milligram, and we have other people that are taking 60 to 70 milligrams, and it's just kind of taking the edge off their pain. And then there's everyone in between. So it really is more of a, like, I would suggest trying a product, like get a liquid, and get a liquid that's pretty potent, that's like at least a 15 milligram, if not higher, and just start with less of it. Start with a couple drops and then work your way up from there. And you'll know if it's helping your stress, you're gonna know it. But it's better to start low, but I like to have people get a more potent product and just take less of it, because then you have the flexibility to add more. So after a week, if half a dropper full isn't helping, if around 5-10 milligrams isn't helping, now we can start building up. And it might take you 17, it might be 20 milligrams. It's really, I know that's a frustrating answer, but it is so individual, and it's really just a trial and error thing. And sometimes finding the right brand for you too, because they're all a little bit different. I have gallstones and fish oils upset my stomach. Are the herbal supplements milder than the oils? Well, fish oil, because it's a fatty acid, might be problematic because you're just not breaking down fats. So you can actually take a digestive enzyme that might help you digest those products, because I don't think the answer is to not eat fats then. I think it's to figure out how can we give our bodies the right digestive help to break those down so that they don't cause stomach upset. You might want to try an algae-based omega on the stomach. The herbal supplements milder than the oils, though. I would say start with like something that isn't just like a high dose turmeric. Maybe start with a ginger. Ginger is actually really good for like nausea and upset stomach, and it's very anti-inflammatory. So New Chapter makes a ginger as well. So maybe that would be a better one, or holy basil, or something that's gonna not be like super spicy, or like turmeric can cause extra acids to be released. And I just think with gallstones, maybe that would be bothersome to you. So certain ones, black seed oil might be helpful too. That might be easier on your stomach than doing a turmeric. So someone is asking, what about vitamin E? And I'm not sure what the context is. I don't know what you're asking.
Maybe Nicole, just
about.
as an anti-aging, perhaps what they're thinking. We hear a lot about vitamin E as an antioxidant. So perhaps, from that perspective.
Okay, yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah, so vitamin E is a great antioxidant. You can overdo vitamin E. It's a fat soluble vitamin. So I would start with like 200 or 400 IUs and see if that's enough. But yeah, vitamin E is really good, but so is, it's hard for me to just single out one vitamin or mineral because we need them all. And I like to just say, see where your levels are and get them tested. And then you'll have a better indication of then what vitamins and minerals you can use to help fight against aging and help to protect your cells. Krill oil versus fish oil. My opinion. Okay, so I love krill oil. Krill are little, almost like shrimp-like sea creatures. They're like crustaceans, but they're real tiny. It's what like the most giant whales eat when they like open their mouth, and then like they eat the little teeny little krill. So krill came out several years ago as being more absorbable than fish oil and being easier on the system, not causing like a repeat, if that like fishy taste. And I found that to be true. I find that there's some research showing krill oil, specifically the type of phospholipid omega-3 that it is, helps with like PMS symptoms and cramping and things like that, which I've had great experience with. But I think there is much more research on omega-3 from fish oil. And there are certain companies, like the companies I put, Whole-Mega and Nordic Naturals, that have shown to be just as absorbable, if not more so. And there's so many more studies backing the fish oil. Krill can also be overfished, and it was for a while not great for our whale population. So that's the other thing. If you get a krill oil, make sure it's sustainably fished, just so we're watching out for that, so they're not overdoing it. But I think krill is good. I personally prefer, though, a fish oil, especially if it's a triglyceride form. I think when they said that, when some of that research came out, they maybe were just using like your drugstore brand that wasn't that absorbable, and then krill was better than that. But I still like Whole-Mega and the Nordic Ultimate Omega better than krill. Are the benefits minimal if you're getting up in age? What are the benefits of curcumin? Curcumin is one part of turmeric. It's one of the constituents in turmeric. So if you're taking a turmeric supplement, it will probably have a standardized amount of curcumin. You could take like an isolated curcumin, but as with most things, and I think a lot of the curcumin products we have in the store have a combination of those other constituents in turmeric that just help it along. So it's not just working on its own. So curcumin would have the same type of benefits as turmeric, being anti-inflammatory. Some find that curcumin is more helpful for pain relief, so versus just turmeric on its own. Are the benefits minimal if you're getting up in age? I am never a person that thinks there is ever like a too late. I have seen amazing things in 80 and 90-year-olds. So it's like, no, sometimes the benefits are more because you were going through your life for so long, being inflamed and having all these other issues. And once we start working against them, you find like, hey, I'm not as old as I thought I was because I feel so much better and I am able to do more. So I would not say, I don't think there's like a minimal effect the older you are. I sometimes think there's more. Is purchased ginger tea as good as using fresh ginger made into tea? Probably, if it's, or especially if it's organic or like a good quality. I don't always know equals, like they don't, it's hard when you have a dried herb that's in a tea bag versus like a chunk of ginger to know exactly like what's equivalent. But I think a tea version is fine. Absolutely. And then what is a good natural fruit and veggie wash? I like to use baking soda, vinegar, and like if I've got an apple or something, and then wipe it off, rinse it after I soak it and then wipe it off. But there are store-bought ones. I know Ecos has one that a lot of people like. So you certainly can do that, but I don't know if it's laziness or just cheap. I don't know what it is. I always just end up going for things like baking soda and vinegar to clean most of my stuff. So the berries are the only thing that I don't like to like soak them as much as I'll do like a spray or something and then rinse them real good, because you can't really wipe off like a blueberry. You'd be there forever. So that kind of thing I don't do. But thank you everyone for your questions. I know we're getting long here, so I don't want to take too long. There is one more question that popped up. What is quercetin good for in our bodies? Quercetin is a bioflavonoid. You find it in like onions and some of the white foods. But recently, I think since COVID, it's gotten even more attention. It usually was something I would say is more antioxidant and great for allergies. But we're also finding it has some good immune properties too. So you might be reading more about it. The Institute for Functional Medicine, I know, promotes it for immune benefits, for antiviral benefits. So that could be why you're hearing more about quercetin. But it's in our foods. It's in a lot of the foods you're probably eating. If you supplement with it, you're going to get even more of that antioxidant and immune benefit.
Nicole, thank you. That was really, really good. I can say personally that I find these webinars to be very motivational because I look at those slides you put up, and I know my diet is not the slide that you put up always. And it always motivates me. The last one you did, you talked about the multicolored carrots. Since then, I've been buying the multicolored carrots. So yes. Yeah. So thank you for all the good information. I did want to say to everybody, thanks again for joining us tonight. Stop. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in any case, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We're still debating what our next episode is going to be in the series of pushing back against aging, but keep your eyes open for wherever you heard about this. We'll put it out there and we'll keep going on it. So thanks again for joining us. Nicole, thanks a lot. This was great.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.